You all must have seen the Indo-Canadian dispute which started on 19th of September 2023 when the Canadian PM Justin Trudeau put out a statement in the House of Commons which created ripples in the Indian diplomat world.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
India was accused by Trudeau for an assassination of a Canadian citizen named Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and in return, Trudeau said that an Indian diplomat would be expelled from Canadian soil. Canada took this so far that they have even reached out to US, UK and Australia to put diplomatic pressure on India. This is what started a heated diplomatic battle between India and Canada. And while most people might think that this is to be yet another political conflict, I must tell you that this could have a wide-scale economic impact on both the countries. Why I say so? Because while India is the 9th largest trading partner of Canada, Canada is the 7th largest foreign direct investor in India. And Canadian investment funds have invested so heavily that they own 2.68% stake in Kotak, and they also have 1 to 2% stake in Paytm, Zomato and Nykaa each, and they have 6% in Delivery. They have also invested more than $800 million in Flipkart, and they have also invested INR 16.62 billion Indian rupees in Phoenix Mall. And on top of this, millions of students and executives are studying and working in Canada. And this could, number one, affect their lives, and number two, it could affect the economy of Canada. Because foreign education from India alone contributed around $4.9 billion to the Canadian economy in 2021. So yes, it's a political rift, but this could have a wide-scale impact on the economies of India and Canada as well. So in this episode today, let's try and understand why Canada is supporting Khalistani, how will it affect India, and most importantly, in the long run, how will this hamper the trade relationship between Canada and India? So before we get into the details of this case study, we first need to briefly understand how this entire Khalistani movement got kicked in India especially. So this entire Khalistani movement got a massive boom in India with the siege of Golden Temple in 1984. That was followed by Operation Blue Star. That operation intended to flush out all the terrorists who were involved during that event. And all the things got escalated with the assassination of then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. But soon after this episode, the group of people which were called rebels were then tagged as terrorists by Indian government, and this resulted in people flooding India on a massive scale to Western countries. Now to tell you, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, as this man who got killed, was one of those people who fled from India 26 years ago. He tried to take asylum in Canada using a fake passport under the name of Ravi Sharma. But the big question is, just because of a person, why Canadian government is spoiling its relationship with India, which is worth billions of dollars? And why did Prime Minister Trudeau himself go restless when the stakes are so high with India? Well, as it turned out, Justin Trudeau is doing this because of a political compulsion. Trudeau's party was able to secure higher number of seats when compared with the opposition, but it wasn't sufficient to form a majority government. So Trudeau needed support, and this is when a man named Jagmeet Singh came to his rescue, who was the leader of an opposing party called NDP in Canada. And Singh's NDP had won 24 seats in 2021 election. So Justin formed a coalition government with Jagmeet's NDP party, and everything worked very well in Trudeau's favor. But the problem started when Jagmeet Singh became very vocal against India. He started supporting Khalistani agenda in open, and that is when the entire problem began. So do you see what's happening over here? Justin Trudeau has to keep supporting the NDP, and supporting NDP means supporting the Khalistan movement, and supporting the Khalistan movement means hampering diplomat relationship with India. And this is where the recent turn of events started. But now, since we are looking into the business impact of this entire event, so let's dive into the numbers in order to understand that how exactly the disturbance in this relationship would hamper both the economy. So let's break this down and understand the trade and economic impact better. Firstly, trade is one of the most important factors for any bilateral relationship between the two countries. And the total trade between India and Canada today stands at $8 billion, with India exporting about $4 billion and importing about the same amount. India is Canada's 9th largest trading partner, where Canada is not even close to 25th largest trading partner. And even though the trade between India and Canada is not so significant, but if we look from the Indian perspective, between 2001 and 2019, the India's import from Canada grew at 10% with a 25% jump in 2021 alone. Recently, because a lot of Western countries are moving away from China, Canada was about to sign a free trade agreement with India. Now, free trade agreement, in a very simple word, is a trade agreement between the two countries where both the countries agree to lower the import taxes such that traders from both the countries could trade with lower cost. For example, Canada is a huge exporter of canola oil and pulses, and India is a huge exporter of mangoes and spices. So in this agreement, Canada would agree to decrease the import duties on mangoes and spices from 12 to 3% in exchange for a reduction of import duty on canola oil and pulses from 10 to 2%. Sometime both the countries might agree to apply zero import duty on each other's commodity. This way, Indian trader can compete in the Canadian market and Canadian traders can compete in the Indian market. This is how free trade agreement works. And this free trade agreement had the potential to boost the Indo-Canadian relationship and take it to the next level. For example, agri-food trade could have increased by 56%, manufacturing could have increased by 57%, and merchandise export could have increased by 2.42%. This is the reason why India and Canada were about to sign a free trade agreement called Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. So now that India has paused the negotiation of the free trade agreement, both India and Canada exporters will suffer losses. And this free trade agreement between Canada and India had the potential to actually double the bilateral trade between the countries and to take the entire amount to $16.8 billion. And if this is signed, Canadian export will grow by 39 to 47% and Indian exports will grow by 32 to 60%. This would have added 5 to 6 billion in each country's GDP, and most importantly, it can generate anywhere between 8,000 to 14,600 jobs in India. But now this entire free trade agreement process has been halted because of this diplomatic rift between the countries. The third impact of this conflict could be pullout of the investment which the Canada's investment companies have done in India. As I told you during the start of this video, that Canadian investment funds own 2.68% in Kotak, which is worth 1.15 billion Canadian dollars of investment. They have also invested $800 million in Flipkart Group and INR 16.62 billion in Phoenix Mall. They also have 1 to 2% in Paytm, Zomato and Nykaa each, and they also own 6% in Delivery. And just like the Canadian companies, even Indian companies have invested 6.6 billion Canadian dollars, generated over 1,77,000 jobs. So if things get worse between India and Canada, the 7th largest investor in the Indian capital market might start pulling out from India, and because of these fears, stocks like Kotak and Zomato might get affected. In fact, from what I checked during that time, both the stocks were in already red. Now, mind you, these are not very practical measures and these will only going to happen in very extreme situations. Lastly, there's a huge Indian diaspora in Canada, from students to corporate executives. In fact, 40% of the total overseas student population in Canada are Indians. So again, if things go wrong between India and Canada, the student permit might get affected and the Indian government could impose heavy taxes on Canadian university. Businesses in India could also get affected because of this conflict. So this is the background story and the impact of Indo-Canadian rift which is currently going on. Although now the Canadian PM Trudeau has changed his stance from being aggressive to being professional. You can watch this video, which is the latest statement released by the Canadian Prime Minister. So now you see why this is happening. This is not because of the trade impact, what they are going to see. They must have already calculated all these numbers which I'm telling. This is happening because India halted its visa services for Canadian citizens. Now India has imposed ban on Canadian citizens globally. Plus, 5% of the total population in Canada is comprising of Indian origin, including Sikhs. And they're also not liking this. They don't like the tussle which is happening between the Canadian government and the Indian government. So that is the reason why there is a change. And this is a possibility that in coming few days, you might see things are getting normalized from Canada's side, not from India's side, because India's stance against Khalistani movement is pretty straightforward. We'll see you with the next interesting topic. Thank you so very much.